Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and this is my review of Dynasty Warriors Origins, played on PC via Steam. Disclaimer, I received a review copy of this title from the publisher, but here it is. After more than 5 years, we have our Dynasty Warriors 10 of a sort, a reboot of the franchise with significant changes. But the most pressing question is, does it work? Is it good? My one-word answer to that? Yes. As somebody who's been playing Dynasty Warriors for 24 years, a quarter of a century almost, I believe that Dynasty Warriors Origins is the best evolution the franchise has had since 2. Back in the day, when we went from a fighting game to the 1 vs 1000 franchise that has since had many entries. Dynasty Warriors Origins is an action game set in the Three Kingdoms era of China, circa 200 AD. The player takes on the role of a mysterious wandering swordsman who suffers from amnesia and becomes embroiled in the turmoil that shakes up ancient China. Drought and famine resolving into rebellions against corrupt governments, rise of heroes and establishment of new kingdoms. The game takes place over 5 chapters, has multiple endings, and you can expect to spend at least 20 to 30 hours getting to the first of those endings, depending on your playstyle and how much you rush and if you skip cutscenes and all that. If you want to do everything, you're looking at closer to 100 hours. Functionally, the game is structured thusly. You have an overworld style map that you can walk around, a 3D representation of China. This isn't an open world game like 9, but this map system works far better in my opinion. On this map you will find the next main objective, of course, and more of the map will unlock as you go through the story. Here and there you can find collectibles to pick up on the map, NPCs hidden away in corners. You can also find the main characters to speak with, who may offer you combat objectives for rewards, and you can raise your bonds with them, giving little cutscenes and interactions as you get to know each other. There are cities which present smiths for buying and selling weapons, as well as inns where you can receive letters, manage your character, and craft gems. More on those in a moment. Back on the map, you essentially have 3 main combat types: skirmishes, side missions, and main missions. Skirmishes are extremely short combat scenarios that typically last 2 minutes, maybe 3, and these will constantly show up as you move around, giving you an endless source of combat, which also rewards skill points and the like. Side missions are closer to 5 to 10 minutes, medium-sized battles, and then you have the major main missions. These are 15 to 20 minutes sort of range. Once you've cleared enough of the game, you will be able to replay these main missions too at any time. The game features a New Game Plus option which allows you to jump a bit ahead in the story as well. Combat in Dynasty Warriors Origins feels familiar, but with enough new gimmicks and features to advance the classic systems. Once you get a little ways into the game, you will unlock your own little troops, and you can give them commands such as to launch a volley of arrows and so on. But for right now, we have a handful of weapons, such as longsword, spear, gauntlets, pike, and so on. Each of these have their own playstyle. For example, the longsword follows the classic charge system from Dynasty Warriors, chains of weak attacks that you can branch off into heavy attacks. For example, XY will be a launch, XXXY will be an AoE attack, and so on. Whereas Kuan Yu's weapon is more like you infinitely chain weak attacks into strong attacks and vice versa, giving it a very nice flowing feel, kind of like Renbu from 6. Whereas the gauntlets operate on a stance system. Strong attack will enter a stance that allows you to unleash new attacks. For example, if you press block and strong attack, you will enter like Viper stance, which is different from Phoenix stance, which is done after pressing strong attack after an evade, and so on. Each weapon can be ranked up to unlock new abilities, and each time you rank up a weapon, you'll also rank up your character, level them up. Leveling up your character in this way gives you health and other stats, but also unlocks new skill trees, where you can further upgrade your character, and this is something you can grind out if you want to. Beyond this, you can equip accessories to boost your character's stats, bring horses to ride around in battle and on the map, and also gems. These are unique strong boosts that you can equip one at a time and function on almost like a mini gacha system, kind of. You find special ores out in the world, sometimes in missions, and at inns you can refine that ore, which will convert it into gems. Duplicates will level up the gems, and these do things such as increasing your range, the damage of your parries, letting you heal after beating a certain number of enemies, things like that. In combat you can dodge, block and jump of course. Perfect dodges and parries, done by blocking at the right time, are powerful defensive tools. If you parry an incoming attack, you'll counter and help break the enemy's fortitude, a sort of poise system. Break their poise entirely and you can unleash a powerful attack that might outright defeat an enemy at lower health. Enemies also have unblockable attacks that you can interrupt with a special sort of interrupt skill, and some enemies will have unblockable, uninterruptible attack, where you just have to avoid them entirely. On the offensive side of things, you have weapon arts that operate on a resource that recharges as you attack enemies, encouraging you to play aggressively. Each weapon has unique arts, but you can also have some that are universal, such as a palm strike that you can use with any weapon. Then you have your Musou attack, sort of ultimate. Then you have your God of War Rage, or True Musou you could say, which is built up gradually and sets you into an ultra powerful mode where you don't take damage. Overall, the gameplay feels good to me. They've brought in a new focus where it comes to 1v1 battles against other officers, which is far more advanced than it has been in any of the other titles. Boss fights haven't really ever been a thing in Dynasty Warriors outside of stuff like Strike Force really. But there is a demo available for the game, and I would strongly suggest try out the demo and it will give you a really good feel for how the game is. The story too has been shaken up drastically. You have a set character to play as, no creator character. This is perhaps the most divisive part of the game from what I've seen online. Quite a few people, they don't like how the player character looks, they would much rather play as one of the heroes or create their own character, and I get that. Within the context of the story, I will say it makes sense why we play as this character and don't get to create one. It allows the freedom to interact with other characters without being forced into a specific role, if that makes sense, but I do understand why people think, why couldn't this just be a creator character, because it wouldn't have been that different, shall we say, if they had allowed it. A little bit like Wulong, if you ever played that. However, unlike Wulong, your connection to the characters is quite a lot stronger here, as they are often the crux of the story. But the mysteries of the player character, without giving anything away, are gradually revealed as you proceed through the story. And this story is told well. I do appreciate how this allows a more cohesive, focused narrative. That said, this is Origins, which is why we don't really even get to the Three Kingdoms era, so to speak. But the story that is here is nice, and I can easily see how they can add on to this in the future. Characters are portrayed in a rather more subdued way. Take the leader of the Yellow Turbans. In the past games, he was a raving, comical lunatic. This time, there are still hints of that, but it comes across far more down-to-earth and nuanced than it ever has before. Or you can take Dong Zhuo. In Origins, he's actually kind of cool and kind of intimidating. You can understand why he was brought in to deal with the Yellow Turbans, and why he then, well, did what he did, shall we say. He isn't just a big, greedy fat man where 90% of his lines are, haha, I'm fat and I'm a glutton, you know? The Flandrization of characters in Dynasty Warriors was understandable, because there were hundreds of characters, but I do like this more serious approach that they've taken here. I always found it sad that Cao Cao's bodyguard, you could say, Shuzu, I can't really pronounce names, I'm sorry, but I never liked how he was kind of a joke in these games. This time I feel characters get a little bit more respect. Of course, not every character gets equal attention, but I think so far the game has done an impressive job, as the characters are a big part of the appeal here. Everyone has their own favourite. On that note, I know people will be disappointed at the relatively low playable character count, and I get that, 100%. The only thing I can say is that in a game like this, it makes sense why we mostly play as the one character. I don't really like the design of him, but that hasn't detracted from my enjoyment of the full game, even if we can't customize their appearance, and I kinda wish we could do that, a little bit. It remains to be seen how DLC will pan out for this title. I see them doing some. The map in this game makes me see how they could easily add in new stages, new story, and weapon types, and things like that. And that would be my guess, by the way, is that we would get new weapons and new stories. Kind of like what they did with Wulong and Neo. I think if I had to make an educated guess, I would say we'll get 3 DLC story chapters, and each one will add a new weapon type, maybe 2. But I don't know what the plan is. If there is one, that's entirely speculation based on what they've done in the past. Finally, before we wrap up this review, let's talk a little bit about performance and technical aspects. I didn't have any crashes or technical issues with the game myself. I played the game at 1440p with the settings maxed out. I turned VSync off, anti-aliasing off, and instead used DLSS set to quality, but I think I might put it to DLAA actually, for anti-aliasing. The game supports frame gen. I'm not turning it on unless I really need to, which so far I haven't. I capped the FPS 660 as I almost always do, and the only times I had it dip were during cutscenes and very infrequent momentary kind of stutter, like a little dip to like 40 for like half a second. But I think that was most often caused by me pausing the game for like 30 minutes and then coming back to it and unpausing. Don't question me. This game feels well optimized, which is nice in an age where not many are. I'm sure you can get good performance on a range of machines. File size is around 45GB, I installed it on my SSD. Overall, my only real issues with Origins would be that I'm not a huge fan of how the main character looks, but that's kind of subjective, honestly. The gameplay won't be for everyone, because no game is. If you didn't like past EW games, who knows if you'll like this one. I would say, if you've tried them in the past and they never really worked for you, try the demo at least for this one and give it a shot, because although it's still recognisably Dynasty Warriors, they have mixed things up a bit with more of like the 1v1 combat. See what you think at the end of the day, because just because I like something doesn't mean you will like something, and vice versa. They've added so much to the feel of battlefield simulation, and I love that this game, in a lot of ways, puts me back in the mindset and the feeling I had when I played Dynasty Warriors 2 back in the day, where allied troops felt more aggressive, your allied officers, they could do things, they could defeat officers by themselves, and we get that here again. The way they move around the battlefield, sometimes they will march, sometimes they will charge. They're not always just, running from place to place. It feels a lot more organic, realistic, and just lively. A very nitpicky complaint, but one that I'm noticing every time it happens. The animation of the character standing up in the tent or at inns looks kind of goofy to me. That's kind of one of the only things that's been annoying me. Maybe that's a good thing. The game's graphics, they're not the most mind-blowing ever, but they are extremely serviceable. The levels look nice, the character models are great, the lighting and the colours are pleasing, and the most important part, it runs well, with hundreds of enemies on screen at once, and that's what we want, isn't it? The cinematic presentation, not just of cutscenes, but of gameplay, has taken a step up. For example, when you land a finishing blow, the camera pulls out or pulls in. You get a feel that you're kind of there in the combat, if that makes sense. I know saying something like that's very played out, but it adds to the immersion when you really feel the impact of these attacks. And there's just something so cool about the longsword finisher where you parry the enemy, the camera pulls out as their weapon flies away through the air, and then you bonk them on the head. That's just, it's great, it's exactly what this series needed. But if you'd asked me what this series needed, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that. And that's the best sort of feeling, when you go, oh, I didn't know I wanted this, but this is what I want. And I'm generally just really happy with Dynasty Warriors Origins. Oh, and the music. There's a lot of classic Dynasty Warriors music kind of remixed or has motifs in there, and the music's a really big important part of these games, so thumbs up there. After the extremely disappointing Dynasty Warriors 9, Dynasty Warriors Origins isn't just good relative to 9, but is really fun, and I can recommend it. Go try out the demo, see what you think. Big thanks to the publishers for sending me an early copy, and I hope this review was useful, or at least entertaining for you. Please do let me know if you have any questions. And Dynasty Warriors Origins is out this week for PlayStation 5, Xbox, and Steam.